Awesome. So we are recording just so we can have it saved. All right. So welcome back, anyone and everyone. There's a few friendly faces here that I've seen from our previous 2 weeks that we did. So this week is respectively titled Week 3, and we're going to be talking about the mid game. So mid game is essentially what I would really consider it based on where we're at now in Infinity Kingdom, given that there is not a hard timeline yet on when, for example, something like a server versus server is going to come out. I think a lot of us already know, for those that do pay attention to the announcements or the Facebook announcement posts as well, that server versus server, SVS, KVK, depending on what you know it as, is going to be coming out. So devs thankfully have confirmed that. I think a lot of us probably expected or anticipated for even AVA, which is the Illusion Battlefield, to probably take a little bit longer of time to come out. But I think thankfully with it coming out sooner than even I expected it myself, it definitely gives me a lot of hope for potentially how quickly or soonish their SVS server versus server format would be coming out. Once that does come out, then we'll probably have a little bit more of an accurate timeline when it comes to being able to actually set somewhat of a more endgame timeline for eventually when we kind of get to that state. So for now, again, let's start off talking about kind of what the outline is going to be for mid-game. So we're going to talk about months 2 and 3. And the reason why I wanted to focus on months 2 and 3 is because even though we covered the first month for week 1, months 2 and 3 are really more about the lead up to migration. And mainly because in the first month, which is kind of more or less the feeler month when you're getting into a server, and even albeit the first week or two really are kind of, you're just kind of teasing and really just dipping your toes to kind of get a good feel for how the server is initially or early developing. Mid-game is really when things are starting to solidify. You're probably getting to a point now where you're able to look at things like city distribution. You're probably going to already know who your allies are, who your enemies are, diplomatic ties, things like that as well. You've probably already stabilized your player base and your alliance, right? You're probably consistently working on filling in some of your silent or your present status player gaps, so you can always keep working on getting to that 100%, if not near 100% activity. Then we'll talk about the different server shapes, kind of how they can take fold, just give you some different examples on how servers can go about organizing and structuring out their mid-games as well, just to kind of show you that not every server is the same, and there are different ways that servers can play out, especially in the long run. And then we'll talk about how to know, we'll expand on this a little bit. We did briefly touch on this in week 2, but we'll talk about this more in depth, where we discuss how to know if a server is okay for you to stay in, right? So if you're still in your server past a month, right, how to really know on what could or would potentially happen to indicate on if it's still good for you to stay or not. We'll talk about some things that you can do for like migration prep, things you can do prior to migration. So I'll give some tips and some insight there, which kind of also falls under the lines of recruiting. We'll talk about things like mergers, picking up some of the leftover scraps for active players. We'll give you some tips on how you can go about facilitating mergers so you can boost overall activity as your server continues on from the general drop-off that anyone and everyone is always going to get. We'll talk about some of the power shifts that you'll probably be seeing from some of the cap increase spikes that will happen anytime you're hitting that next big family alliance tech upgrade. And we'll talk about what are good things to notice, and then what are some things to kind of keep an eye on. And then the last thing is we'll talk about kind of managing players and alliance expectations. So that's kind of going to be our outline guide for this week. And of course, in between each, we'll definitely ask if anyone has questions as far as in between. Even though we do want to try and stay on topic as much as we can, I'll definitely do the best job as far as trying to respond to anyone and everyone that does have a question, just for that. So, awesome, cool. Looks like voice channel is up as well. So, that is good in case anyone wants to type. Okay. And I'm sure they'll probably get a little indication there for anyone that's on right now. Sweet. Yeah, Perry came to our rescue there, so that's always nice. All right, so let's go ahead and start without further ado. So the first thing, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about is we'll start with, let me start in the beginning here, because the covering 2 to 3 months prior is still a pretty wide range. So we're going to start right at about the bubble for month 1, kind of getting into your early kind of 30 to 35, 30 to 40 day period. So at this point, you are most likely already in an alliance, and your alliance is probably still working on stabilizing. Now, let me start off just talking about some good practices on what your alliance can do. If, for example, let's say you're at a month, maybe you're around, 100 to 110 player capacity. That's usually where most active alliances should be, as far as a bare minimum gauge around that period. And at this point, right, you're probably trying to either fill out some of your silent or present players, or that's only if you have a few. If you're in an alliance that maybe has a little bit more than that, then you're probably looking at how you can either fill a bigger amount of players that you have that are silent. And some ways that you can go about this, these are general tips. I've talked about this in some of my videos, but what you can do is, let's say you only have a couple silent players. A good practice is to go ahead and utilize your settings. So for those of you, for example, that are in-game, right, I'll also give some examples there, is that if you go to your Alliance tab, and let's say, for example, you go to Alliance, and then what you're going to do is you're going to click Settings. And after you click Settings, you will pull up you should see, and again, it's going to be in the bottom right hand corner, right? So you'll probably see people that are for example, applying to your alliance, and then from there you'll go Settings, you'll go Invite, and then you'll click Invite All. That is a very easy and simple way, and yes, it might sound pretty basic, but if you keep up with that on, let's say, for example, on something like a daily basis, then it will allow for you to, it will allow for you to keep recycling, but more importantly, hopefully just having more long-term incoming traffic, right? So you do it on a daily basis. I can tell you in my situation with OS, I pretty much utilize it, I'd say, a couple times a day. All right, so I might go Settings, Invite All. I might do it 3 to 5 times a day, right? Just depending. Otherwise, I'll do it maybe 1 or 2 times a day. But doing that, and then obviously keeping track, the important part here too as well is that in order to have a good chance of keeping players that will, when they do apply to do the conversion, right, is that you want to try and be really at least actively paying attention as much as you can to any incoming applications. And part of that is because if you invite people that way, and let's say they sit too long waiting for an alliance to join, that could also have a little bit of a psychologically negative impact, because in their mind, they're thinking, well, they just invited me, right? If I'm sitting here and waiting for 30 or 60 minutes to be accepted, they might go and apply to other alliances too. And then if someone else accepts them before you do, right? So it's just good if you have, and let me expand on this point too, is it's good to have as close to 24/7 coverage, and you can do this by just expanding your officer team, right? So the easy way is you just try and fill officers that are either, even if it's 1 or 2, that are just playing on opposite time zones as you, or even if you try and do something where you have 3 or half of your officers be on the opposite time zone, right? So you can have a team set up there. You can do things like a leader rotation as another example. So like, let's say you have someone that you trust and you guys just rotate R6. So you have kind of a day and a night team, right? So you have your on team when you're online, and then you can always transfer lead or R6 to someone else who's going to be online during your offline time. And then what they can do is they can either work with the other half of the officers, which is going to be on during their time, or if let's just say you have a lot of active contributors, you can make the argument for maybe having two officer teams, right? Maybe you just place 3 or 4 other people that are online during your time in an R4 position, and then you just swap out the officers with the R4s because those players are going to be online during your time. So the good thing about it is there's a couple ways that you can really manage it really well. But again, it does take a little bit of time to do. These are just some good practices that I find, not only one for officers, but how it will directly affect you getting incoming players into your alliance. Now, the other way that you can go about doing this, if you are still looking for some activity, is you can always go off of, oh, well, they completed server maintenance. That's always nice to know. So you can go off of you can go off of doing your, oh God, what's the word I'm looking for right now? Doing mergers. So let's say you want to go out and try and do some mergers, right? And you're trying to find anything from a small to, medium-sized group, right? As far as who you're looking for that is going to be able to fill in more activity for your alliance. One way you can go about doing this is you can go off of the leaderboard. So a really good example, this is something that we do in S36, that I've always done in Kingdom Builders that I've played, is you come up with a nice kind of pre-drafted message, something easy that you can copy and paste. The reason why is because now you can do it kind of 2 different ways. You can copy paste it if you want to just edit and customize the beginning portion. So if you want to say like hi or greetings or hello, and then you put the player's name, if you want to try and personalize it a little bit, it does take more time. But in short, by just doing this, it'll allow for you to message players a lot faster, therefore saving you more time, therefore hopefully making your management life a little bit easier. And so what you'll do is you'll just kind of go down the board. So let's say you have an alliance that's in the blue faction. So you can go to the leaderboards, you click ranking, right? You go profile, pick ranking, click alliance power, and then you can filter it based on blue. Or you can just go off the overall. And then, you just message people based on you just message people based on where their ranking is. So maybe you go down to the top 50, maybe you go down to the top 100 on the overall boards, and you just message each of the leads, copy paste, and then you just wait to get a reply. One of the things I like to do is try to work in adding my Discord, so that way if some of the players in some of these alliances do have Discord, then at least it's an opportunity to have conversation in a place where communicating typically is a little bit easier, albeit if any of the people you're contacting as leads do not speak your native language, right? Then maybe going off of in-game might be easier to use the in-game translation. Otherwise, you'll probably have to do the Google Translate route where you're just copying and pasting their responses to translate and then back and forth with your responses. But these are just some good tips that you can use if you're trying to get small groups. And then at times you might find that, if let's say you're out there looking for a merger and you have an alliance that, has 50 or 60 players, but you might only have 20 spots, maybe you consider reaching out to another alliance that's within your family. Maybe you consider just reaching out to another friendly alliance and trying to kind of facilitate and negotiate mergers that way. That can also be a benefit. Or you can just line up your alliance to bring over, their most active or highest powered 20, 25 people. Then as you increase cap, you can just already have a designated flow of players set up so you can bring them in to your alliance, right? It's almost like having just an active queue of players that are already lined up so they can join the moment that your cap increases, or if you end up removing an inactive player that later shows up. So a couple ways to go about doing that there. Now let me go ahead and move on to, and actually, and before I do move on, does anyone have a question in regards to anything I had talked about there when it comes to kind of getting to that day 30? And if you do, you're more than welcome. You can raise your hand, you can do the show request, or you can do the little hand emote if you have a question in regards to that, and then I can always call on you and bring you on if you'd like to voice a question or a comment based on that portion of that month. Let me see here. Stars is a visitor, non-member. Oh, that's interesting. It now actually says that. I didn't say that before. Stars, what's up? Welcome. Yeah, you're more than welcome to talk, so I just brought you on.
This is hot, boy.
So sure. Sorry, I thought I was only hearing some music there in the background, but yeah, if you want, you're more than welcome to type your question out in the voice channel chat. Just so we can make sure you're here to get an initial confirmation, that'd be great. Does anyone else have another question as far as on anything I talked about there for the first part of the starting out in the month, any doing anything about as far as recruiting players, any as far as merging or being able to replace any silence? Let's see. Zark? Oh, cool. Let's go ahead and send Zark82 an invite. Looks like we're getting a few more people joining as well. Awesome. Zark, hey, welcome. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, no, I hear you good.
Hi, hi,
Welcome.
yeah, welcome. Good day or good afternoon, everybody. So my question is that
Oh, sorry, I think you might have cut out for me.
Yes, so my headset is went off when I already started to speak. Can you hear me so
I
in
do.
some way? Okay, so my question is that most of the cases I'm facing that kind of issue that I can follow up the progress of development of the team members. So it is hard to manage or see how people are working on themselves or on the development. So mostly I try to use some kind of Excel sheet, but this is a little bit hardcore to go over 100 people and see weekly how much power change was done by them. So I don't know, there is some kind of better solution to do this in some way or some kind of application support or that is not really needed to follow up in this way.
So, and I'm sorry, just so I have a good understanding, you're asking about is there a way to better gauge or collect data on players who are going inactive or who are inactive, so you can find out who to
Yes,
replace?
yes, 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 yes.
Okay.
So basically, when they last log in, how much power change or was done by them under a week or how much time they spent in the application.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, more information to filter out that kind of person that not really playing too much to
Okay.
build up a core team.
Okay. Okay. No.
Because yes,
Oh, oh,
follow.
oh, oh, oh no, sorry. Were you going to add on more? I was just going to answer the question, but yeah, no, I'm sorry. Sorry, did you have some more to add? I mean, otherwise, I'll give you an answer to that.
Okay.
Okay. So no, yeah. So thanks so much. Let me move you back to the audience. I appreciate the question. So I think part of the question I can give an answer to on some good practices. I think the other part is probably more of a suggestion based, as far as you're looking for some features to potentially be added to the game, as far as that are more related to stat tracking for players. So I think with that in mind, right, when it comes to Infinity Kingdom, there are a couple ways that you can do it, and these are some things that we do in S36. So a good example, and I've talked about this in one of my videos as well, is taking advantage of like spreadsheets, right? So what you can do is you can basically set up a spreadsheet with columns to track stats for your players. So you can, as an example for a spreadsheet that we use, we have some columns that would be like true. It'll say like Lord Power, it'll say Troop Power, it may say donations, it may say helps, and you can track these things if you just go in and you audit every 2 or 3 days. Now, obviously, if you have more people that are a part of your alliance, especially your officer team, that is able to assist in doing this. Like as an example for the alliance I'm in S36, right? We have 3 players, including myself, that rotate. So about every 2.5 to 3 days, each of us take a turn, and we'll go down the list and we'll audit all of our players, right? So we'll go and look at those stats. We'll look at what the Lord power is, and then we'll factor, okay, well, what was the plus or minus for the increase when it comes to donations, right? And if you have an indication on how many donations they should be doing across a 24-hour period, right, then you can factor that into what their new donation amount is compared to the last one, right, given how many days you've taken to then do the next audit. Same thing with true power and Lord power. You can gauge how quickly or how much a player is improving or progressing. That can also be used to calculate. As far as, I know some suggestions have been mentioned where if they added something in like a date joined line item, whether it was on, like if you're in your alliance and you're clicking on your members and then you're going through the members in your alliance, if they added a line next to hyper or whatever the current player status was, or even somewhere else on their small rectangular quick view card, it would be nice if they added something like that where it would say date join, just because it gives you an opportunity to look without having to go through the logs. But that is one example of something you can do in your alliance to help better track stats so you can gauge activity. Again, it does take a little bit of work, but if you get a good system in place and you're doing it on a regular basis, then again, it'll probably be easier to do at that point. So let me see here. Looks like there's a couple more questions from some people. I'll also take a look at voice channel chat, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Let me see a couple more. Looks like we have a couple non-visitors. JR, welcome.
I have a really suggestion about what you should add to the game Infinity Kingdom, and I was just wondering if you would go through with it.
Sure.
I feel like there should be a boss, and he's just he challenges you to a rap battle, and then his main rap is can I give you a suggestion to his rap or something, can I just go? I have the lyrics ready for it.
Oh, you do? Gotcha. Well, you know what? I think something like that is, at least for a lot of the Kingdom Builders I've played myself, I don't know if that would necessarily be something that you would typically find in the majority of Kingdom Builders, but you'd be more than welcome if you'd like to type it in the voice channel chat, as we would still love to hear.
It's mainly a gay rap, so.
Got you. No, again, I think any suggestions you can either go through in-game support. You're more than welcome to post it in the voice channel chat if you'd like as well. Hawk, let's see. Let's go ahead and bring you on if you have a question.
Hey man, can I suck your cock?
Fantastic. No, again, any questions that you might have in-game support related, that might be a little bit better. I feel like I'm almost getting a vibe of, oh gosh, what was that thing that people were doing a while ago on that? Man, I can't even remember right now. What was that conference sharing app that they ended up having to add in, remind people about doing password protection? I can't even remember right now. But anyways, let me do this, guys. So let me go, and I think what we'll probably do is Zoom. Thank you. Yes, that's what, I couldn't remember what it was called for the life of me, but yeah, that was the good stuff. That was the good stuff. I remember when they were posting that on mainstream media. That was pretty intense. Let me do this then, just to make it a little bit easier. I think what we'll do for now, by making a real-time adjustment, is that for any non or new members, you're more than welcome to ask a question in voice channel chat. For any existing members, you're more than welcome to ask a question. We can bring you onto voice. It's always nice when we can make effortless real-time adaptions. Let me go ahead and move on, which is going to be talking about, let me see what we have next. So we talked a little bit about recruitment and migration, picking up players. Let's talk about some other things that you'll probably be experiencing around the day 30 to day 40 window, which is going to be power shift from cap increases. So this is going to be something that you are going to be able to do as far as how you're going to be viewing general cap increases. These are really good things that I think are just good to keep in mind of. And we'll go over a couple of them, and then I'll talk about kind of what are some timelines that you might be experiencing as well. And so some things that you'll probably be seeing from cap increases right now. Keep in mind, up until the day 30 point, is that you will most likely be figuring out pretty early on, as far as when are, I guess I should say when, and then also what you'll be visually noticing on the alliance leaderboards, right, is some alliances that'll probably be edging out over others as far as how the players are coming in, and then increasing as well for the overall power that you're going to be at least seeing grow. Typically, a lot of this happens within the first week or 2 weeks, where you'll probably start seeing 1 or 2 alliances jump out over others. These are things we talked about during week 1 and week 2. And then, as far as that goes, then you'll start getting to your week 3 and your week 4. Some of those things will even out, but you'll still be seeing some more of those spike increases. Part of that is going to be just mainly from you getting some of the higher big family tech researches, and then of course coincidentally having to then try and fill some of that gap with any of the actives, or kind of going through some of the merger options that we mentioned previously. And let's see. Now with that, so again, once you now start getting past, I would say, month 30, it really depends. Now, this is going to be a little bit of talking about power shifts and also about how the server is going to shape, right? Some of you are probably in servers where you are experiencing a little bit of probably some imbalance, if not a lot of imbalance. And this happens in, we did briefly touch on this in week 2, but keep in mind that there's a lot of things that happen where you will just not be able to anticipate or even predict how some of the power fluctuations are going to occur and how they're going to happen. So some of you might see some power gaps in your alliance where maybe the number 1 alliance is 3 or 4, 5 mil. That's above number 2, 3, and 5, or 2, 3, 4, and 5, just depending on how far down it goes. I think one of the big challenges here is that in almost every server that at least I've ever played in or have had accounts in, not only in Infinity Kingdom but in other kingdom builders as well, just based on the trends of how kingdoms develop, you're always going to have a power imbalance, right? And that is because of a few main points. One, it's because players want to constantly be improving their accounts. In addition to that, they also want to be powering up in a lot of different ways because they're improving their accounts, and from that point, they then may consider and try to then join higher ranked alliances. So those are just things to consider and to keep in mind, is that the way that you will play and interact in any new server or kingdom is leading in this direction. You are going to have players, no matter how many or how few. Some will join an alliance just to try and get into the highest one they can. They'll power up, whether through spending or just through their free-to-play grinding. And then some will leave your alliance to just go and join another. They may give you a heads up. They may not give you a heads up. These are very consistent trends that will happen throughout your playing experience. And you'll notice this. Probably as a member, you might ask your officer, your lead, or an alliance chat, hey, why did this person leave? Maybe they know, maybe they don't. But when you come in with, I would say, those good realistic expectations, it makes understanding the situation that it's one just really out of your control a lot easier when you're a leader or you're an officer, and then players won't get demoralized, right? I mean, as an example, right, there was, even in my alliance OS and S36, right, we had maybe 5 or 10 people leave within the first month, and then we essentially found an opportunity to merge. So we merged, there was another alliance that had about 15 to 20 people that were active that merged into our alliance, and we were able to immediately boost back up, I should say, to 100% activity. But during the time that some of those players were leaving, right, I took it upon myself to send an alliance mail out, right, to try and be active in alliance chat so I could answer questions and or concerns that players were bringing up. Because typically what usually happens at that point is you'll have some players, depending how many, may start on this kind of negative Nancy run where they'll end up saying, oh, well, people are leaving the alliance, maybe I should leave, it's not going well, we're not expanding anymore. I mean, anything and everything you could probably hear. And so from that, it's why it's good, I think, as a lead and or an officer, to be informed and to be educated, and hopefully more so knowledgeable that these things can and will happen, so you can be in a better position to educate the players in your alliance, right? Which again goes directly back to how even things like power shifts will occur, because of the fact that when a top alliance increases power, they now have a lot more spots available to them. That means that anytime a power increase happens, or I should say capacity increase happens, that will give a higher ranked alliance a little bit more indirect incentive for players that are in lower ranked alliances to potentially view that as an opportunity to leave. Maybe they'll reach out to the leader ahead of time. Again, you don't know, as much as no one would know, right? Unless they come out and tell you and say, hey, I reached out to this higher ranked alliance. They said I can come join. Now, again, the other thing to keep in mind, and I'm only going to briefly touch on this because I do want to try and get into the next topic and take some questions as well, is that keep in mind that when you have when you go into a kingdom or a server and you're able to work on, because again we did touch on this in week 2, but the thing to keep in mind is that I would say 99.99% of the time, new alliances, or better yet alliance leaders that are creating alliances in new servers or kingdoms, do not all potentially share the same beliefs. And that's because if I'm joining a server, a good example that I provided last week was when we had joined S36. So when we joined S36, or excuse me, when I was in S6, I think that's the better example. When I was in S6 for my brief time there, we ended up joining as one alliance's worth of players. We had about 50 people in our group. We all joined day 1. We didn't do any jumper accounts, and we just all joined the same alliance. Because all the other alliances were different, and in addition to that, none of the other alliances came in with more than one alliance's worth of a group, you then have to do what the majority of new servers are going to have to do, which is you have to proactively reach out to leads, probably on day 1 or day 2. Right, once you start to probably get to the first week or the second week, that's when things are evening out, right? You're starting to see kind of who's going to solidify themselves, like within the top 20, top 25 on the boards. So it's a little bit easier for you to know, one, who you messaged is probably going to turn out to be someone that you can keep communicating with, and then if anyone kind of falls out below the top 25 or the top 30, right, then you can probably, again, still communicate, but you may not prioritize them as much as someone who's higher on the ranking. So from that being said, right, these are things that you have to do if you're going in now. If no one's doing that, because again, you don't know you don't know if other leaders or officers and other alliances are going to take time out of their day to try and build somewhat of a Discord server, if they're going to try and build somewhat of a community, or some kind of an organized, as far as any kind of organized efforts, I should say, when it comes to trying to figure out how alliances and players can all play together in somewhat of a unified way that's going to benefit the player experience. So that's just something to keep in mind, because one of the big things we always talk about is player retention. I'm sure for anyone here who's played Kingdom Builders, again, in my opinion, it's probably the best mobile gaming genre out there, that at least I've had the opportunity to play in, again, for the types of games I personally like, because I think there's a lot of things you can do inside and outside the game that are extremely dynamic and very engaging in a lot of different ways. So again, just some things to keep in mind when you are going about like how you view power shift and cap increases, especially when they happen, and what are some of the reasons why they would happen that we talked about. So before I get to the next topic, let me go ahead and I will open the floor. Let me see here. Again, if you are a new member or a visitor, you're more than welcome to ask a question, but just if you don't mind, please do that in voice channel chat, just because we won't call on you. Let me see, Zark Zark82 had a question. Zark, go ahead. Let me bring you back in.
Okay, so most of the cases I have seen that some players that have used for offense and stand to boost them
Zark, I'm so sorry. There's a lot of static and lag in your mic right now. It could just be the connection. Okay. Yeah. Again, if you don't mind typing or texting the question out, please feel free.
Yes, I'm talking the channel. So you can read it. So that is about the keep a player of you happens.
Gotcha. Sorry, Zark. Yeah, it was still going on. Again, if you want to try resetting or doing something with connection and then raising your hand again, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, please feel free to type it in the voice channel chat so I can respond or at least comment. Let me go through voice channel chat now and just ask real quick. As far as, let me just see if anyone has a question in regards to anything that I just talked about topic-wise. Clueless said these games really need API calls to pull this information. Yeah. Will's like, boy, that was inappropriate. Yeah, sadly. I mean, you know, I almost quantify it to the same thing as like when you're a kid and you're like going around and doing like doorbell ditching, right? I don't know if anyone did that. Not that I'm promoting doing doorbell ditching for houses, right? But when I was growing up, I think it was something my cousin and I did, at least for where I lived. Thankfully, there wasn't a lot of homes, but I kind of equate it to that, but except probably worse because people are coming in with ill intentions of wanting to either just say inappropriate things or do things like that. But again, I think for them, that's where they probably get the enjoyment out of life. Even though when I say it out loud, it sounds really depressing. But hey, to each their own. I think doing like easy kicks or bans is always a good way to adjust for those things. But again, also why typically anytime we get a new or person before, and now we just won't do that going forward, which is super easy fix. So you'll never have to run into that again. And then I also like to try and keep the mouse hovered over the move audience button. So the moment that the moment that someone gets one or two words out that indicate anything other than valued engagement, I'll just move them right back to the audience and they can't talk anymore. So it's actually really easy. You just I always come in with low expectations, assuming that probably one or two people will attempt. So I'm just catching up right now on chat just to see if anyone asked a question in regards to the last topic. Let me see if anyone has a hand raised, just in case. Kawa. Oh, sorry, I did not see you there. Let me go ahead and bring you in. Yeah, always good. Maybe I'll have to talk to Vita maybe about saying like, hey, do you want to just possibly have a mod that just hangs out for the duration? Yeah, shout out to Perry. Sorry, Kawa. I just called on you. I'm not sure if you're still here. But I did give you... let's see here if we have another one. Okay. Kawa, if you come back, raise your hand. Otherwise, let me call on Clueless.
Hey, so when you're talking about balancing power across alliances, how important do you think it is to try to foster balance between the three different colors, since that's a fairly different aspect to most kingdom builders I've played?
Sure. No, a great question. Thanks, Clue. Let me. So again, it is a little off as far as from one of the topics that we kind of had a chance to go off of a little bit earlier, but yeah, let me go ahead and talk about with as far as what you can do for the faction. So this is something that I know I do get, I would say, quite a lot of questions on as far as balancing out faction activity and relevance. I think with how young and early the game is right now, there is a lot of uncertainty and I think unknown in how important, how unimportant, and then what level in between is it going to be for servers to keep factions alive. Now, an example I've seen in some other servers is you'll have some that just completely went away with doing a multi-faction system, and they just have one faction, like whether it's red, blue, or green. And then, and some of their reasons for doing it are as, let's say they wanted to eliminate the contention of relics competition. And so what they did is they went ahead with just one faction, so that way that faction and the players in that faction will just be able to, have at it for the gold, right, that spawns from contention of relics. Personally, I think some of the drawbacks of that is when you don't have a lot of activity in other factions, it almost feels like you're cutting out a third of your potential active player base in the server. And now with the new feature update to Contention of Relics, where the amount of gold nodes that spawn is heavily based on overall activity from players participating in the event across the server, to me it seems as though if you're able to get away doing that and you don't lose any players from more or less eliminating other factions, then sure, right? If you want to kind of have the best of both worlds with your cake and eating it too, I'll be honest, I just highly doubt that that you're gonna need to do as far as ensuring that your activity stays as high as possible. So, I think with that, my viewpoint on it is that because there is a lot of unknown, because we don't know how SVS is going to pan out, I personally just think it's a lot more beneficial to try and stick with 3 active factions, more so than 2, just because you're preparing yourself for what the unknown is and what it could be. And I also think it's a lot easier to condense or to minimize than it is to expand in some situations. In this case, it's a lot easier if, let's say, SVS comes out and there's just such an overwhelming advantage to hyper-focusing players in one faction, then okay, right? Maybe you can make an argument that that is what servers can go to. But let's say over the course of a month or two, or wherever your server is now, and you only have one faction's worth of activity, but then SVS comes out and they apply features or incentives where you can get additional rewards or other bonuses because you have multiple faction activity, then it's going to be hard because you're going to have to then go through a recruitment process. You're either going to have to go and rebuild shells or alliances because you might not have any active shell alliances there where you can fill players into. You're also probably going to have to do a lot of external migration recruitment to get people over to that. And usually if you're building something up from scratch, it's usually going to be a lot harder to fill in players because you're going to have to try and focus on mid to large group size recruitment, right? Which arguably is like half to full alliances that you're going to have to try and really look at bringing over so you can fill them into this empty shell in another one of your factions. So again, depending on a lot of factors. One, how often are mid to large groups moving or looking to go to new servers? Is your server united? Are you going to be able to draw players in? Or is your server competitive in SVS, right? Do you have a shell available that's already a little bit leveled? Did you prep that from day one? Did you not? Right? Do you have rogue players in your server? All of these things factor into if players are going to come to your server over others. Right, and a lot of these things, I'd say more often than not, are typically things you want to prepare from day one. One of the things I can tell you, and this is probably one of the best tips I'll give out to anyone, so you're more than welcome to thank me later on when this pays off for you, is that for those of you who may not be familiar with the term that we refer to as shells, right? These are essentially just another name to use as an empty alliance or just an alliance itself, right? The husk, if you will. And one of the important things here is that if you're trying to build out a server and you want to look forward to how to create an opportunity where you have incentivized resources, right? You have perks of your kingdom that is valued when you're trying to bring over players, and more importantly, really varying group sizes from mid to high. One of the things that is very appealing to groups is when you have leveled alliances. Basically, it's almost like you just working on a farm alliance or a academy, and you're putting active players in there or alter farm accounts, and you're constantly leveling it daily. That is a lot more appealing for whether or not your kingdom or server may get a migrating group over, because if they can get put into an alliance that already has developed tech, that's a lot more appealing to them than if they go and migrate to a server and they have to create an alliance from scratch that does not at 50 player capacity. So you're more than welcome. That is a very wise and knowledgeable gem of wisdom that I can tell you that if I knew that when I first started playing, it would have done wonders for me. But again, it's more so something that you would really take advantage of if you're a part of management, right? So if you're a project lead or another alliance leader, definitely take that for what it is. But anyways, I hope I answered the question, even though I went off on a little bit of a side tangent. Sorry, question answered in a way I think. Oh, okay, cool, awesome, Kawa. Okay, no, just wanted to make sure. Let me see. Okay, let me go ahead then, and if there's no other questions on that topic, let me go ahead and move on to the next one. So the next thing we're going to talk about now is going to be. Let me just do a quick review. We're also going to retouch on some of the server-wide events that are Contention Relics, King of the Hill, Contention Lords, and then a few others as well. So we talked a little bit about different. So let me start off here talk about. We'll transition to different server shapes that kingdoms can take. Servers can take. I always have to remember to use the appropriate word that we're using to define a world. So, with servers, as far as some areas that you're able to. Okay, so the thing with servers and as far as the different shapes that they can take. So. This is a pretty expansive topic, but it is really important to note because it does directly apply. It does directly apply to how you may view a server, and then also if you've never played in multiple servers. And let me ask as well, I guess for some of the people that are here, right? How many of you have played, and let me start here. How many of you have played another kingdom builder outside of IK? Just a show of hands would be great. You guys can just use the little hand icon. Simple yes or no. Just curious on how many people here have played other kingdom builders, right, before you came into IK. Okay, awesome. Even some of the visitors. Cool. Always nice when the visitors are genuine. Okay, awesome. So about 10, I'd say like 11 to 12 people. So now let me ask this follow-up question. How many of you that have played other kingdom builders have played in a kingdom or a server for at least a year or longer? If you've played in a kingdom or server for at least a year or longer, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, wow, decent amount, almost half. Okay, cool. Now let me ask a follow-up, and this will be the last one. Raise your hand if you have played in 2 or more kingdoms for at least 6 months. If you've played in 2 or more kingdoms or servers for at least 6 months, you can raise your hand. Right, and that can be in the same game or in other games. So, okay. Okay, cool. So about 8, 9, 10. Okay, let me go ahead and dismiss. So there's a very important reason why I asked that question, and let me take a minute to explain. So, if you have played in other kingdoms or servers, you probably know that not every kingdom or server is going to be managed, ran, trended in the same way from the first one you've played in. If you have only played in one server, you may make passive assumptions on how other servers or how other kingdoms will play out. It is not until you have taken time, whether that's from you making extra accounts or additional accounts, or if that is from you going and viewing other servers, if that's from you talking to players in other servers on how they do things in their server. Once you've done that, then you probably will get a better indication of just knowing and having the knowledge that things can be and most likely are different in some ways from one server to another. What that will then allow for you to do, which ties us right back to the topical point, is that it'll allow for you to know that that servers can take different shapes, and it's a lot more common than it is uncommon. And so from there, it's good that I like to at least tell people, because eventually when I found this out, I realized that I needed to have a little bit more of an open mind on how I viewed other servers and how other events could be ran in other servers. Because it essentially means that the way that an event is being ran in a server I'm in is not it's not the only way. It's not like the one and done way that an event or a specific stage in an event could be managed, or it could be expected to be ran that exact same way. And I feel like when you know that, it makes it a little bit easier, because you're now open and hopefully a little more receptive when it comes to hearing out maybe an idea for the way of an event is being managed by that kingdom or server, or how other alliances or players have experienced the way that events have been managed in other servers. So you're able to now take in more information, and it allows for you to now gain more experience, because you're now expanding your knowledge base on how other things, and maybe you might even take some things away and say, well, you know what, this kingdom runs this event this way, and they've experienced this. This kingdom runs this event this way, and they've experienced this. Let me take the best of both worlds and try to come up with a solution, because maybe you really like that idea. Maybe you really like that type of way that that server goes about managing an event. But maybe because now you've had the opportunity to go and experience how other servers manage, you've maybe now thought of a way that you can mitigate some of the cons to the way that they do it, right? And now you have this brand new idea that it's almost like meshing, I don't even know, meshing your two favorite ice creams together, right? Or, you know, for those of you guys who have seen Ratatouille, I'm a big Disney guy, but or at least animated movie guy. So again, if you've seen Ratatouille, fantastic movie, right? When Remy is combining the cheese, I think it's like the cheese and the mushroom, and he had something else, and it was like the flavors were combining, and he had that moment, right? Something like that, where you're kind of having this Jimmy Neutron brain blast moment that's occurring. And those are things that can happen when you take time to expand what you know about the game. So again, tying that back to how servers can take different shapes when they're starting out. Again, your experience in a server, especially if you make an account in, let's say, you know, S50, and then you make an account in S51. I mean, you could have completely polar opposite experiences based on how that kingdom or that server is developing, right? Did everyone come in as an individual alliance? Was there a jump group that came in? Were there 2 or 3 jump groups that came in? Right? Was there a group of high spenders that came in? I mean, anything and everything could really happen. You know, which is why I always tell people, you know, you're kind of just playing roulette at the end of the day with how things could go. So again, from there, once again, by knowing all of this, it will allow for you to have a little bit more realistic expectations on whether or not you continue to stay on the server you're in, or you opt to potentially migrate out, or maybe you stop playing the account and you make a new one and you go to another server, right? This is something that I don't really think kingdom builders are probably going to be able to solve for the most part, because it's just a typical trend, unless they were actually putting in some types of in-game features that were allowing for us to mitigate, or just for players in general to mitigate these things. I think some examples of really good proactive features I've seen in games is when you're able to section off or gate off certain sections of a map. Now, I'm sure some of you who've played other games, you're probably familiar with even one that has this type of feature in it. It is one that I've talked about before in the past. But the one area of this that I like when it comes to just the typical server volatility trend that follows Kingdom Builders, and Infinity Kingdom's no exception. Not that it's a good or bad thing. It's just a default situation that the game's environment goes in, is that if you were to section off zones, for example, the good thing is that it limits a lot of the early fighting and a lot of the early PvPing that could happen in a server, and it forces you to then reach out to alliances and players that are in other provinces beforehand, so you can work on things like early diplomacy. You can see the alliances that are most likely going to come out of those provinces or those zones prior to them opening up for you to then move on to the next area. I think that is something that allows for areas like that to be a little bit more managed, and it almost proactively incentivizes players that are of the kind of winning alliances or the ones that are left standing in their province to take time out of their day to reach out to other alliances that are in other provinces. So that way, before those zones open, you kind of already have at least a little bit of a water temperature gauge on what level of hostility or peace you could expect. But again, IK is different with the way that it is, so it just means that things kind of have to be accelerated and done a little bit earlier rather than later. Let me see here. Let me see here. Will Deal had a question. Will Deal, if you just don't mind asking your question in the voice channel chat, that'd be great. Just for any non-members or visitors or brand new members to the server, we're just asking respectfully if they can just ask a question in voice channel chat. But if you are a member that you've been here for a while, then you're more than welcome to ask a question. I'm happy to call on you via voice. Let me see if anyone has a question in voice channel chat real quick. So, I played mine for 2 days and gave up. Forge says, my main kingdom builder 9 out of 10 kingdoms were the same. Everyone in one clan are dead. Yeah. No, that is... Oh, man, that's pretty spot on. It is pretty spot on. You know, when I talk about things, I try not to... I try not to play devil's advocate too much and tell people, you know, or at least inform players of... what is just the default highest chance that a server is going to turn into without any level of management or structure that's provided to it initially. And that's just because there's always the chance that it might not turn out that way. But I think to Forge's point, it is something that I usually see, and I think most people that have played in a couple different alliances probably have seen more often than not. A couple different kingdoms have probably seen more often than not as far as servers trending in that direction. I said none of my kingdoms were the same, but I played several kingdoms. Only thing most of them had was lead family. Didn't like getting suggestions. Also, the reason I ended up leaving the kingdom in the game. Yeah, and that happens too. And you know, to Embla's case, right? She probably had a situation where she played in kingdoms and just got lucky, where she maybe played in them back to back, where they were just where they just had a jumper group that got into each of them, and that happens quite a bit too, especially in the newer servers, not the necessarily older ones. Depending on the games you play, as you may come across that. So, S35 about to hit Civil War again. Elite said, can you go over what is the cost of migration like if your server's 30 days old? Can you go to newer kingdoms, or do you have to wait? So, again, if you're in, like, let's say you started the game yesterday, and you're already over level 10, let's just say as an example, you spent a bunch of money, you're at like 200-300k power already, you can migrate day one. But you have to wait until a server is 90 days old. So, in that case, Embo got extremely lucky. But yeah, Lee, you can migrate to any server that is 90 days old. And as long as you're under, well, we assume the cap now is at 2 mil. But given that they have a no limit on migration, on the migration cap from World Heart, it is something we're just waiting to get a confirmation on. But at the moment, the soft cap, let me put it that way, is at 2 mil. But you can jump to any server that's over 90 days old, as long as their server status allows for you to go to. So, but yeah, no matter what, everyone has to wait that time. There's really no way to get around that. So, all right. Okay. So let me go ahead and let's see here. I don't know if there's another question. Okay. No. So let me do this. Let's move on to the next topic. Let me see. We're almost at about an hour right now, which is somewhat nice. Man, maybe I'll actually have a chance to do a town hall for our server today. That would be pretty cool. Because usually I'm running these a little bit long. So, okay. Let's talk about the next one, which is managing players and alliance expectations based on being in month 2 and 3. So let me start off first with alliances, and then we'll go to players. So around this point, once you get to month 2 and 3, you're probably going to be experiencing some form of enjoyment, happiness, resent, basically any and all of the good/bad stuff that could come, and it's for a few different reasons. It could be because you have alliances that are asking if they can get more cities. It could be because alliances are asking if they can get one city. It could be from reasons of them noticing or submitting complaints that there's too few alliances that have too many cities. It could be because some alliances have the best cities and they don't even have any of the higher level cities, or they don't have any gold cities and you have them all. Right? Anything and everything that you could imagine someone might, especially after you get king. Right, so after COR 1 finishes and you have kind of a king picked out, or is based on, right, if they hit the 200k power, then your king or queen in these cases might get messaged a lot. And that is something that when you play these kinds of games, as far as Kingdom Builders itself, and again IK is no exception, is that you need to know that you are essentially signing up to be a customer service representative and basically tech support in some ways as well. And if you do not enjoy that social aspect of communicating and talking and answering questions, right, because you just want to do nothing but lead, that's fine, but just understand the expectations that come with you leading an alliance, and or even if you're an officer, and what some of that will mean based on certain milestones that you are going to hit in your server. If you're king, you're going to get a lot of messages from a lot of people. It could be messages from leaders. It could be people asking you, hey, can you come help us take this city? Hey, can you send over a couple players? Hey, can you help us defend against this group or these players that are attacking us? Or, hey, we're getting jumped right now. Or, hey, can you try and help us finish taking this city because we just got counter-sieged? I mean, it can be for absolutely anything. And that's why it's good to have those realistic expectations, but also knowing how to address those things earlier rather than later. And definitely do not ignore. I say that coming from a position where if you're a king or queen of a server, or you're a top, or even if you're a top alliance, let's say you're the number 1 alliance, you're probably going to get messaged a lot, almost in the same capacity that someone who's king or queen is going to get messaged, because players or alliances will probably ask the same of you. And it's pretty standard. It happens in almost every kingdom builder. And so from that, it's good to know how to address those situations when they come up, right? That's utilizing your server mails or your king's mails, depending on the games you play, where you can message everyone on the server. Again, I know the current capabilities of what we can do in servers is somewhat limited as far as how we're able to inform with the length of context that we're able to provide, because right now we can only send 300 character server mails. It's not really a lot to work with. Hopefully that's going to be improved. I know I've been suggesting it to some of the IK reps I have, along with others as well through in-game suggestions, and then of course through some of the feedback videos that we've done, which reminds me I'm probably due for my next feedback video as well. But that is something that we've asked them about, which is, hey, can we just improve server mail from how it looks now and just do it like you're sending an alliance mail out, but just increase the character limit to maybe like 1,000 or 1,500 would be great. That way you can have a subject line and then you can also have a message body. I mean, that would be, if Daddy had to ask one thing for Christmas, it would be that and not Santa Claus. So that would be really nice. But again, neither here nor there. So so from there, right, as being in an alliance, is that again, at this point, you probably already have an idea on who the allied alliances are, who the enemy alliances are, right? How's diplomacy going, if it's going well or not. And we're going to answer some questions in a sec, guys, too, as well. Once I finish, we'll definitely have a moment for that. So at that point, right, it's now, right now you're kind of getting into like the mid-game prep phase where you're trying to figure out, okay, do we really have any hurdles or any big problems in our server that we need to overcome? Right? And then have we been game planning on that? If not, let's start game planning on that. Right? Because you don't want to turn into a situation where you're letting something fester instead of addressing it head on, and then you end up later turning into the point of where you're having a civil war, right? Or you're just having multiple alliances break out and fight each other, and that's only something that is going to cause players to leave your server and overall just keep lowering activity. And the one thing we always talk about is that, remember, general drop-off is a real thing, and you're going to always get into situations where any decision that you make, think of it like this. As an alliance lead, or a top group of alliances, or even if you're king or you're queen, you can send out a server mail, and if your server mail is not viewed by everyone as like neutral or good, some people will leave. Right? If you're an alliance leader and you post something questionable in world chat, you'll probably get some people that'll leave. Think of it like it's a constant decline of player loss that is just spread out in intervals. Right? Because you're going to have people that are going to leave your server every day. Now, it could be a couple people, it could be 10 people, it could be 50, it could be 100, right? But those first couple days where you have the opportunity to bring in anyone and everyone, right? Because when a new server comes out, you're getting 100% of that incoming traffic, right? And most servers are usually filling up to about, I want to estimate somewhere around 40,000, give or take maybe 5 or 10. That at least servers are filling up with new accounts. And so, right, you have to think of it like, let's say 40K is your max. The moment that a new server comes out and you're no longer getting any of that incoming traffic, and you probably will, you'll probably get more minimal traffic, right, probably up to the next 24 hours once a new server comes out. But then after that, it's a matter of what decisions is your server making together that are going to keep as many active players here as humanly possible. Because that is then going to directly translate into how much activity do you have for SVS, how much activity do you have for setting up IB/Illusion Battlefield teams, right? How much activity do you have where you can then do things like, internal alliance versus alliance events, do things like prepping for SVS? How much activity do you have that's going to be able to boost the amount of special resource tiles that you get for contention relics? There are so many long-term implications that come from having healthy server activity, where it all starts from day one. And most players here, if you enjoy these kinds of topics that I really enjoy talking about when it comes to how to appropriately manage kingdoms and servers, you're probably over here I'm sure some of you might even be a little overwhelmed just because there's a lot that I'm talking about. And these are things that if you just never have managed a server or a kingdom for what I would argue to be longer than a year, where it successfully lasted under your stewardship, then I would say that a lot of this stuff, it really can be good to defer to people and to pick people's brains, whether it even be me or someone else that you might know that has, right, to see how they have kind of got things to a certain point and almost kind of heeding to some of that wisdom and knowledge. Because trust me when I say, as a new player coming in, even when I first got into Kingdom Builders myself, I didn't know anything. The only thing I thought I needed to do was get in, do my dailies, click everything, power up. I never paid attention to any kind of, discussions that were going on in world chat, or to people mentioning things about politics or policies. I didn't even pay attention, like when events came up. I didn't even care to pay attention or to try and notice why certain things were happening when certain events were coming up. Right? If people were sending out server mails, I didn't even check to see if people had a Discord for the server. because I probably could have got a lot of good information from there. I didn't even really read server mails, and then I later realized I probably should be reading every single server mail that's sent out, unless you're in a troll server, where I have seen a couple of those in IK, but that's not outside of other kingdom builders, where you'll just have some of the kings or queens that just do nothing but just send out troll mails. But again, these are things that are, really, at least if anything, I hope that people enjoy hearing about things that are outside of you just being a typical player, because a lot of these things are almost directly and then at times indirectly affecting you as a player. And if you don't know the ins and outs, or if you're not taking the time out of your day to, join a server Discord, or to take time to read mails, or to ask questions, then at that point it almost just becomes, your passive assumptions based on what you're seeing, without really fully understanding or knowing what exactly is happening, and more importantly, I think, why it's happening. Okay, so let me. So anyway, I guess that kind of touches on both the alliance expectations and some player expectations as well, for how things can kind of start playing out, especially not only when you're getting into a new server, but how it could play out into that kind of month 2 and month 3. Let me see here if anyone has a question. Briss, you're more than welcome to ask a question in voice channel chat, just for any new members or visitors. We just ask that you ask a question in voice channel chat. But you're more than welcome to, and please feel free. Otherwise, let me read through voice channel chat to see if anyone had a question in here about anything I just talked about. Interesting conversation. Ha, Zark. You're right, man. Yeah, man. To be a project lead, or even, a king or queen of a server, it really is. It's almost like a second job. But I think for some it's fun. Like for me, it's funny. My buddy, one of my really good friends, yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, you're more than welcome to ask your question in voice channel chat. Please feel free. And then if you end up still showing up next week, then and you're not a new member anymore on the server, you're more than welcome to voice. So it's funny because with a previous experience I had, I ended up one of my really good friends that I've known for a long time, and one of my other kingdom builders that I played. He had been with me across 2 of my jump projects, where we had. I think we had about 800 people we recruited in 2 weeks for the first 2 I did. He had joined me. He was actually a part of the first 2 projects I ever did in this other game. And there was a point. I think we were about halfway into our second project, and we were having some kind of a council. It was like a leader or an officer's voice meeting. And towards the end, as we were wrapping up, he basically said to me in that moment, he's like, "Look, man, I think after being here with you across 2 projects, I do not envy your job and everything you do, because I would not want to do it." And so I think it's funny, but I think there's a lot of meaning to it, because there is a lot that goes into it, right? Which for some people it's fun, for some people it's engaging, for some people that enjoy that social aspect. If you have management experience in real life and you like diving into that, you like supporting people, then being a leader of an alliance, being a project manager, if you're trying to manage like 2 or more alliances, right? That might be enjoyable for you. You might find some passion out of that. Most people, in my experience, usually don't. So it's more of them, wanting to try leading an alliance. I think more often than not, right, there's probably, a lot of alliance leads are, just learning kind of on the go for people that don't already have pre-existing experience. So they either have to refer to their kind of on-the-job training, which I'm sure they'll probably stumble a little bit along the way, or they have to go out there and look for outside resources. Right, and an example of an outside resource would be, if you go out and watch a YouTube video. Like I've done 2 videos on managing an alliance. And we might even do we might even do some future topics. Again, I have one more week next week for our week 4 session, and then we might even transition to something like doing topical meetings. This is something I've actually been asked to do by a couple people that have been attending some of our meetings so far, which is, boss, I'd love for you to do. For example, they said I would love for you to do a session on how to manage an alliance, right? Where you just talk, you talk about everything top down, from starting an alliance to filling activity up to alliance tech path routes to good practices on how to set up your declaration and your internal notice boards, and just everything, right? How to pick out officers, what are things you should be doing on a daily basis as a leader. So those kinds of topical sessions, and I think that I think it's something I'll probably talk to the IK team about doing some of those, but just because I think I think on average we probably would get a higher turnout for specific topical discussions that we do like that on a weekly basis. I think a lot of players would be really interested to get that level of experience. So yeah, it's something we'll probably do later on. Who you really speak or fight? Yeah. So let me see if someone had a question though. So let's see here. Yeah, Annoying Dog, you're more than welcome to ask a question if you'd like, but if you could just please do it in the voice channel chat, just because you're a visitor. So for any visitors or non-members, we're just asking if they can talk or ask a question in voice channel chat. If you're an existing member and you've been here for a little while, then you're more than welcome to come on. Oh, yeah, Mr. Yoke Muscles himself, my boy showed up. So let me see here, Mr. Chocolate Yoke. So funny. Oh yeah. Yeah. Some good advice though, Will. Pinging someone as a speaker multiple times is definitely not a way for them to invite you in to talk. If anything, you're only doing your case a disservice. Though, given that you've done that, you might end up probably not caring for that opinion. And as always, to each their own. What's up? Yeah. But anyways, again, I think that probably covers the managing an alliance expectation part. Let me see where we're at right now. I think I have one or two more topics that we can touch on, and then I'll just open the floor to anything. Right? You guys can ask any question. Doesn't matter what it is. Right? I always like to try and kind of have an overall Q&A portion. So let me briefly touch on contention of relics, contention of lords, which in some areas are close together, and then we'll also talk a little bit about King of the Hill, which is the new event that came out. That is really important as well. So this is probably going to be the last topic that we do, and then I'll just completely open the floor up for anyone that has any questions at all whatsoever, no matter. So let me start with contention of lords. We'll go to let me start with contention of relics. Then we'll do lords. Then we'll do King of the Hill. Just because I feel like the events are probably going to be progressing in somewhat of that way. So for contention of relics, the thing to keep in mind here is that, and again, this is probably going to go into something that Clueless had mentioned earlier as well, right? When asking, do you want to kind of keep your factions alive or not? Is there benefit to having more than one faction being active or all three factions being active? Now, in Contention of Relics, right, the event is for those who may not have experienced Contention of Relics yet, I'll give a brief TLDR, which is that it's just an event that occurs in the middle of the map in the Forbidden Zone. All players can participate and contribute. There's individual player contracts, which are just basically mini-mission objectives that you do to get points. And then there's relic cities that you can capture. They don't affect your actual city capacity limits that based on how many you have. So as an example, if you're at 7 out of 7 cities for your alliance, you can still cap relic cities. They don't count towards it. And then you have World Heart, which is a little bit stronger of a building. And how it works is that Contention of Relics goes for 3 rounds based on the Chronicles, which I think it's 14, 17, and 20 in your server. And then after round 3, that's where the garrison power caps out at. So once you get to COR round 4 and then beyond, it'll be the same power level as round 3. So it just gets easier after that point. Now, with that in mind, right, once you're kind of at this month 2 to month 3 for how you're going to go about managing contention of relics, even though, again, I did briefly touch on it a little bit earlier, the thing to keep in mind and just remember is that the winning faction is the only faction that can actually gather the special RSS tiles from the middle of the map. So that means that if green faction wins, only green players can gather those special tiles. More specifically, that will give them the additional rewards. The 2 non-winning factions can still gather, but they will just not get any of the additional rewards from those special tiles outside of the resources. So what it means is that if, let's say, red wins and blue and green are gathering those resource tiles, because they do have increased gathering speeds, they're really wasting the resources, right? Gold is by far the most finite and most precious resource in Infinity Kingdom. You get a lot of gold from COR. It's by far the best event where you can get the most amount of gold possible. And this is why I say that COR is really more of a kingdom-wide event. You have to look at it like this. If you play COR and you only have participating players from the faction that wins, or for example, if you're in a server like ours where we predetermine which faction's going to win because we allow for an equal faction rotation, so more players can all enjoy the gold that they can get from those special tiles, it's even more important for players from the non-winning factions to still participate. And one, it's now, because of the update they did 2 updates ago, which is great, it now gives incentives for players to participate and to complete their individual contracts along with alliance contracts, which, again, just increases overall participation, therefore increasing the amount of special tile nodes that can spawn once the participation stage of the event finishes, which is on day 4. And so because of that, it's ever more important that you get as much overall participation as you can for the event every time it comes around, regardless if you have a predetermined faction that's going to win or if you're in a server where you guys just do it as a free-for-all all the time. And there are pros and cons to that, as much as doing it the way that we do it in our server. But the thing again to keep in mind is that's why COR is really important, is one, for the gold, the extra resources you can get, and why it's just a good event to manage, I think, appropriately, because it is another example of a big server-wide event where you can lose a lot of activity because of it if poorly managed. Let me go ahead and briefly talk about Contention of Lords. This is going to be short. King of the Hill will probably be the one I talk about a little bit more. But Contention of Lords is pretty short. It's your standard kill event, where you are focusing on just doing nothing but PvP for 2 days. Kill event, I think, is arguably probably the second most important event that needs to be managed appropriately. Otherwise, it's going to be yet another event where you're going to just lose more active players and higher batches of them at that. And that's because, again, servers that do not come together, and this kind of goes back to the managing portion of reaching out to leads and doing a lot of that early structuring and setting up those communication networks between leaders in your server, is because if you do not manage this event, which is a lighter version of King of the Hill, you can end up losing a lot of activity as well. And that's because if you don't have a rule set that you're applying server-wide, it's just going to be a free-for-all, right? And by default, that's what the event is going to be if no action is taken. And what that means is that players will just go around and attack whoever they want, as much as they want, and they'll probably enjoy it for the most part. Now, who's not going to be enjoying that? Probably a good amount of people on the receiving end. And it's probably going to start with your free-to-play base, as it usually does. And so again, that's why it's really important to just try to have a proactive approach on how you manage that event. Next, I'll talk about King of the Hill, and then I'll open the floor up for any questions related to what I'm talking about now or anything else. Is that with King of the Hill is probably the most important event, in my opinion, and that's just because there's a lot more incentive to now participate in the Stage 5 kill event that King of the Hill has, which also lasts 2 days. Now, King of the Hill is a 6-day event. The first 4 days, you're doing things like increasing your power, doing gnomes, doing bosses, gathering resources. And then stage 5 comes around, which is your PvP kill event stage. Again, it lasts 2 days as well. But the difference between King of the Hill and COL is that King of the Hill, you now get more rewards across each stage, each of the 5 stages, and then you get overall rewards outside of the stage rewards. And the overall rewards now include epic immortals that you're going to be able to unlock, which means that it's going to be more of a sought after and coveted event that only some people will be able to get enough shards from some of the new immortals to unlock. And then in addition, some people that place higher, and maybe your 1, 2, and 3 position, might have an opportunity to level up 1 to 2 stars, or maybe 2.5 stars in number 1. So these are things that players will fight for more. You'll probably see your spenders probably spending more in these events. And that's why if you mismanage any, to be fair, if you mismanage any of these 3 events, you're going to lose a plethora, a surplus of arguable activity if they are horrendously mismanaged. And that's why these 3 events are probably the most important events to really apply some quality TLC to. Shout out to my boy MJ, not the basketball player. And so keep in mind that that's why it's just really good, right? This is why you want to reach out to leads, right? You don't just want to leave things up to chance. Because if, let's say you're someone who really enjoys Infinity Kingdom, but you're in a server that doesn't have any structure, you don't have any organization, you can eventually find yourself getting frustrated or annoyed with things that are happening in the server because there is no governing body, if you will, right? There's no oversight to an extent. And keep in mind, some players, they'll just give you the whole, I'm just playing the game the way it's meant to be played. I mean, sure you are, bud. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of cons that come with that mindset. I can't tell you how many times I hear people in servers I've played in or other games where they're like, I'm just playing the game the way it was meant to be played. We don't need to, manage things or take individual or independent action in servers, right? We're just going to let things play out. And typically what I find in most cases is people who say that usually are also players who will take a proactive or active hand in shaping a server in some way, shape, or form, no matter how small or how big it is. And it kind of just ends up being a contradiction in more cases than not. But anyways, that's probably my last topic, really, for week 3. As far as some things that you're going to be experiencing once you kind of start getting to those points. Some of the things I talked about are probably going to be server long and server wide. And then other things are more specific to kind of what you'll be experiencing as a player in that month 2 to 3 window. So again, I'm just going to open the floor up now. So it's wide open. If you want to ask a question about anything I just talked about in regards to COR, KOTH, or COL, you're more than welcome to. If you want to ask a question that is unrelated to what we're talking about in this week 3 show, and you just want to ask something that's Infinity Kingdom related, that'd be great. As long as we can stay on topic with Infinity Kingdom, though, that would be ideal. So, yeah, and you're more than welcome to either raise a hand if you want to voice a question for that, or you can type in the voice channel chat if you'd like, because I know some people may not be in a position where they can. About to get my IK on today. Yeah. Zark asks, question, is it good if lead is in a different time zone as the main clan members? Do you rotate lead position if somebody goes offline and hand over to an officer the role? Clueless said lead doesn't get to sleep. It's funny. Yeah, it's funny. So what I would say there is that so what I would say there is we did briefly touch on this a little earlier, but I think I think a good way of explaining this portion is that if you're looking to try and have more 24/7 coverage for your alliance. And let me see, can I edit this? Oh god, I always forget if I can't, cool. So let's do this. Kingdom Builder, let me see here, let me change this to live Q&A, ask anything IK related. Okay, cool. So Sorry. So let me answer that first. So I think ideally, if you're trying to have 24/7 coverage, then yes, I think it's a good idea. If you find someone, this is a very standard practice in other kingdom builders, where you'll have 2 or 3 people that just rotate lead, right? You'll have co-leads, and it's good to know, especially if there's someone that's been there for a while and you trust. I mean, don't get me wrong, handing over lead to anyone that is not yourself or is not someone that you feel good about, right, there's always a chance, right? There's always a margin there. And I think, again, if you've had, I mean, like, there's some officers I have in OS that I feel I could easily transfer lead over to, right? And we would rotate, mainly just because some of them I've known longer than others. And so I think part of it is, it's a relationship building exercise. It always is in a lot of different areas, but especially in this case. So if you have someone that you trust, that's an officer, and you want to rotate lead because they're on during your off time, that's great. If you want to take it the next step further and you want to find officers where maybe you have 3 officers that are on during your time and the other 3 officers are on during the other lead's time, right? Or maybe in that case 3 and 2, because technically one of the officers would have to be the lead that you rotate with, so maybe you do it like that. Maybe you have more than 6 officers, right? Maybe you have a group of 6 officers because your alliance is super active, and you have 6 officers, or let's say you have 5 officers that are on during your time, and then your 6th officer is your lead, and then when you rotate, they bring in 5 other officers that are on during their time, right? I can tell you that in very well and professionally organized servers and kingdoms I've been in, you'll often find that some of like the top alliances will do it like that. Now, they usually do it more for when SVS comes around. So like when a kingdom versus kingdom or a server versus server comes around, that's usually when they're implementing those levels of micro activity management. And that's just so they can increase the odds of their alliance having more 24/7 coverage around the clock, so they can adapt and update markers, update mails, right? And again, it is a good practice, but that's more like end game. Like that would be more of an advanced topic I would probably talk about, not necessarily something in our kind of introduction week series. But at least I hope that helped answer that question for you, Zark. So let me go back before I read some more posts if anyone has a hand raised. Nope. Okay, let me go back. Let's see here. Oh, wow. Alright, let me scroll down here and see. He doesn't get to go to sleep. I'm good with that topic. Your body is a temple. Your IK gold is more precious than that. Yeah. COR equals life. That is true. Rematch says if your leader becomes inactive, they're removed. Is leader replaced? Yeah. I think it's like 2 days. It's either one day or 2 day. I'm forgetting what the time limit was they put on it. I thought it was 2 days. Awa says, guys, what should we do if a server population is dying and we can't progress the Chronicles objectives? First off, great question. Especially the Alliance level 1, since there is not many active alliances around. Rematch obviously gives the clear troll answer, which is leave the game. JK. Thank you, Rematch, for that. So let me... okay, so the short answer there, which is, of course, I don't get me wrong, leaving the game I think is the last resort, and that's really only on personal opinion based on you as a player, because I mean, people can leave any games for any amount of reasons. What I would say is that if you just want to get out of the kingdom that you're in, or the server you're in, then again, I mean, you got a couple options. You can either, I think part of it depends on your position. I think migration and leaving to go join another server is the obvious first choice. Well, I don't know if I'd say the obvious first choice, but to some, it may be their first choice. I think another choice would be to gauge on how much presence you have in the current server, how much access do you have in the current server when it comes to access to other alliances, whether that be diplomatically, shells. Is there an option for you to band together against what's happening in your server? That would be one. 2, do you think there's an opportunity to bring in players into your server so you can try to band together against, or try and bring in active players to then factor into what you're doing? That could be another option as well. And then I think 3 would be, keeping the unfortunate status quo, where you just keep trying to make the best of your situation. Though I think 3 probably isn't on the table as much as 1 and 2 are. So I would say, yeah, I would probably go with 1 or 2. Again, without me knowing what your specific situation is there, Awa or Awawa, I would say those 2 options are probably the most ideal that you probably have to figure out. So, but otherwise, again, as always, if you're looking to leave and join another server, they have recruitment channels on the IK Discord for that, which is always nice and helpful. So let me scroll here. Let me see if someone had a question. Oh, someone did have a question, but sorry, is that Laura's? Yeah. So, oh, Laura's okay. Yeah. So, hey, so for any visitors or new members, you're more than welcome to ask a question in voice channel chat. We're just not bringing in any visitors or new members into the voice call, just for obvious, unforced error reasons. So let me scroll down here a little bit more. Stop, won't stop. XCall, give it to you. I think something like that. I need to farm more resources. Let's see. All right. Let me scroll down here a little bit more. See if we have any other questions. Oh wow, what's that? Okay, so you said, let me see here. They'll eventually give it to you. Be lucky it's not King of the Grill. What a guy. Yeah. I think Embla hits on a good point, is that, some people will, and I've known quite a few as well during my time, is that you'll have some players who think that, it is a game design flaw, right? Or it's an unfortunate thing about the game. Keep in mind that if you're not someone who has ever been a part of these types of sessions before in Kingdom Builders, if you've played them, where someone was giving you this information that you weren't aware of until they said it, right? You probably wouldn't, you might just go around thinking that, it is something that the game intended for it to be. I think the really great thing about Infinity Kingdom and just Kingdom Builders in general is that it gives you as a player the opportunity to put yourself and your account in a position where you can be a little bit more flexible in how you approach the game, because that not every server is going to be the same. And in addition to that, if you're someone who tunes into these sessions on a weekly basis, you probably hear me talk about a lot. This is one of the reasons why jumper groups were created, right? For some people out there who may not know the history on jumping groups, I'm sure you could probably discern for the most part on why players felt the need to create big groups going into new servers. It was basically for all of the reasons that anyone would mention about experience they would have going into a new server as a single player or just as a single alliance. It's the uncertainty of not knowing what's going to happen, not being strong enough, or not having enough players on your side, or not having a high chance of having spenders a part of your team to where you can influence the way that a server's developing for the better, for an actual benefit. And I could go into a lot there, but that's the simple version of it. That's why big groups are created. They're meant to be deterrents against servers being lawless and basically being set up to fail. And that's not to anyone's fault, at all. It's just the way that servers and kingdoms trend. And once you know that, then and you have more information, maybe you might consider joining a jump group or making one or doing research on other servers to figure out which ones are unified, which ones have a good thing going. I mean, I can tell you right now, there's less than a handful of servers out there right now that you can probably find on somewhat of a unified or just non-Civil War basis, right? Non-server-wide war basis. But again, even those ones all might be different, right, compared to what you experience. And that's one of the reasons why we always advise players. I mean, keep in mind, a lot of the things that I'm talking about, they take time to do, right? For most gamers, they're not going to want to take time to do a lot of this stuff, right? They just want to log in and play, and that's it. But there's also a big difference between just wanting to log in and play, and that's it, and then caring about what's happening in your server, right? If you take the time to care about what's happening in your server or comment on things that are happening, right, then you obviously have time to where you can go and do research on other servers. You can go and message people to interview leads or others as well over a period of time to find and hopefully figure out maybe a new destination that you could take your account to. Otherwise, best case scenario is just to restart. So, I mean, restarting, I think, is never an ideal thing that most people want to do. But, I think and it can be a really good thing, especially when you are in a position where maybe you haven't invested a lot into your account and you're able to restart and hopefully do things better than you did before, not only individually, but I really believe that players have to start looking beyond themselves as players and beyond their alliance outside of it as well. Because there's far too many players that'll go into a new server, they'll spend money, and then the server doesn't pan out the way that they were hoping to, or there's just too much fighting, or they blanketly label servers as Farmville, whatever it may be, and they leave, right? And then they may consider going to a new server. Maybe they spend the same amount of money, right? These kinds of games typically do incentivize new server spending, and again, that's kind of default. But with that being said, it is just something to kind of keep in mind. So when you're figuring out kind of what you want to get out of a new server when you're joining as a new player. So Fish, hey, welcome. Yeah, this is a mobile game called Infinity Kingdom. It's an MMO strategy kingdom builder, if you've played one before. If not, you can check it out on the Play Store, or even Google kingdom builders in mobile games, and it'll give you some information on that. But yeah, we do big server-wide town halls on a weekly basis. So similar in a few ways, but almost completely different. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it would be. Oh gosh, I don't even know. Probably the. I mean, I'm trying to think of some other games. I think Lords Mobile didn't they also do COC? If they did, then yeah, LM would be one that would be a kingdom builder. Obviously, outside of Infinity Kingdom, another big one I think that gets ads is what is it? Rise of Kingdoms, I think, gets ads sometimes. So yeah, I mean, those are some of the bigger ones that you might have heard of. So. Sorry, let's see here. Okay, so we have, let me see, AOW Nothing Man. Let me go ahead and call on you. You have a question or comment. if AOW Nothing Man is still here. Okay. If you come back, let me know. Let's see. Yeah, guys, for any new members, if you're able to, please, you're more than welcome to ask a question, but if you can just do that via the voice channel chat, just for any visitors or new members, we're just asking them to utilize the voice channel chat for now. So thank you. Let's see here, Embla said... Yeah, I think Embla hits on almost a fantastic point, which is that in these games, we're flown, yeah. I think to Embla's point where she says, you know, this is true, but you can sort of know from what you yourself like to do, right? Do you like PvP? Do you like farming? Do you like a little bit of both? Right, so if a top clan gets complaints in World Chat or Kingdom Chat, maybe that might be wrong kingdom. So I think to Embla's point and comment there, the challenge, and this is just another trending layer, is that when you are joining a new server, right, you're gonna get players that you're gonna get some players that just want to do nothing but PvP. You'll get some players that just want to do nothing but just farm their account. It doesn't mean that the people who want to farm their account are not going to engage in PvP, right? That's a very sad blanket assumption, which is not the case at all. And there are reasons why you actually don't want to PvP in the beginning of a server, because it's actually just incredibly damaging to your overall account's progression. I probably would talk about that later in another like focused group. But with that in mind, right, it's the fact that you're going to get a mix. It's almost like you're getting some rainbow sherbet worth of players that, and even leaders, and this can extend to leaders and officers, where they just want to play their own way. And that is by far the biggest obstacle in any new server or new kingdom you play. It doesn't matter what kingdom builder it is. Right, anytime you get in a game where you have leads and they're climbing up the boards and they're getting players, you have no idea how those leads think. You don't know what they want out of a server. You don't know what they're even telling their players to do. And because of that, that's why it's really important for, if you don't want to leave your server and your playing experience up to chance, take time to inform yourself, right? Take time to educate, because those are things that will give you more information than the next person, and hopefully allow for you to make a good informed decision on, how you're going to spend your time and what you're going to do in Kingdom Builders, right? Are you going to be, after hearing me say this, maybe some of you might want to try your hand at leading an alliance. And trust me, you're probably going to have the same frustrations, if you will, with just doing that, because that's, again, if you've never led an alliance before, it's going to be a learning process. And because of, dear Lord, excuse me, and because of you then having to come across situations that it's not only going to be internal stuff, it's going to be external stuff too that you're going to have to work on. It's not only the members that are going to message you on a daily basis asking you, hey, why aren't we doing more PvP? Or, hey, why can't we attack tagless players? Or, hey, why can't I go and do this? Or, why can't I go and do that? Or, hey, can we go and capture this city? Or, hey, this city's occupied by a low-level alliance, let's just go grab it. I mean, as a lead, there's such a high chance that almost every action or inaction that you take is always going to be questioned or scrutinized. And those are things that you'll also experience as a lead. Dear God, I should probably just save some of this stuff for when I actually talk about this in another topical, like after week 4. I can really go in depth to like the psychology and all the things that you're probably going to experience to some extent, because it's a lot. and it happens every server. Some of the things I'm even talking about now are happening in S36. And there's people that are in S36 that are in this call, and they're just like, and they're probably thinking to themselves, damn, this is, boss is right, this is happening. Can this guy tell the future? Got a regular Houdini over here. So, and then my buddy Shadow's over here like, yeah, I've been there, seen that. Y'all should listen up. But anyways, it's good stuff. So, but it is funny how a lot of things are connected in a lot of different ways. I thought you said A and W. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, man. Let me see here. Nairo. Yeah, Nairo, go ahead. You're more than welcome to ask your question. Feel free. I will wait for you to type it out. Oh, sorry. Survivor said... Yeah. I know, right? Yeah, Nairo, if you have a question, again, just because you're a new member or visitor, if you can just ask your question via chat, you're more than welcome to, and I'm happy to provide an answer or an explanation. Even create destructive. Let me see here. Awawa said, yeah, I agree with that. The problem I see is not playstyle, but a sign of whether that new server will be a dead server or not, because any playstyle will not be fun if the server population is dying. Yeah, that's a yeah, that is an effortless good point. I think to be frank, there's just no way to really get around that. The only way that you will have any chance of mitigating to any extent on what can happen in your server is largely going to be done based on, did you have a big group that joined that server or not? That is really the only way, in my opinion, that you can increase your odds and your chances of factoring into player activity, server health, retention of activity in players, being able to be a good management voice and hopefully maybe even force in the server where you can basically battle against people that want to go rogue and they want to attack people. You can set up rapid response teams. You can set up alliance group chats to post PvP cores where those players are just getting targeted all day, every day, 24/7, like 7-Eleven. And again, those are just some practices, but for the most part, those are things that you're going to want. I mean, again, if I'm being blunt in that scenario, yeah, it doesn't mean that every kingdom is doomed to become dead. It just means that there is a good chance that they will, if certain actions from players and contributing efforts are not taken. So, could do this all day. It's my boy Schmidt, Schmitty Schmidt. So, yeah, it's a lot. Don't get me wrong, man. Infinity Kingdom is fantastic. The Kingdom Builder genre I love, but a lot of times it just comes down to adapting to your situation, and understanding what you can do and what you can't do, and having good realistic expectations when you go in is really important. And I think that for any game, of course. But it's not like we're playing a real-time shooter, or we're not playing StarCraft and doing some hard real-time strategy, or we're playing a fighter game, that is, Kingdom Builders in its own right, respectfully, have their own thing going for them. And I think a large part of it is just a matter of figuring out how players can navigate and get the best experience for themselves that they can get. I think that's what's more important. Alright guys, so we're almost at about 2 hours here. I'm just going to go for maybe 5 or 6 more minutes. So if anyone has any kind of last minute questions, comments, concern, feedback, please feel free. cold. Yeah, because after this, we'll probably go do maybe a little impromptu. Maybe we'll try for a little impromptu town hall in S36 on my server or on our Discord. What am I doing right now? I feel like I'm trying to do a million things. Storage. Maybe I should go with increase. Hire me. Hashtag pressure, hashtag buy teleports. Thanks. So Awawa said, this is my situation. I'm playing on server 45. The Chronicle is stuck at number 9 because not enough alliances got to alliance level 4. The server population is bad. Basically, Blue Kingdom doesn't exist there. Furthermore, there is 3 top whales like the picture I attached on one alliance who basically harass everyone. Normal free to play, have 20k powerish. What's the Awawa, let me ask, what is the troop power for the number 100 player on the overall troop power boards? Cause troop power. Yeah, so what's troop power in there? Because I don't know if I have an account in 45 yet. I think I'm a little bit behind. That's funny. That's funny. It's just no. Or more like Nightmare KLR and Fram. The trifecta. Yeah, so, yeah. So, like, when you go on the highest troop power board, just scroll all the way down. Because it defaults you to the overall boards on troop power. So when you go ranking, click troop power, and then it scroll all the way down. And I'm just curious, what is the bubble player's troop power at? Which would be the number 100 player for overall. Because I'm trying to see... yes, for number 100. Okay, yeah, because I'm working on... Okay, yeah, see, I'm on S40 right now. I'm like 5 or 6 servers behind. So I need to spend a day just making more farm accounts. Let me see, 33k? Okay. So, yeah, top 100 players at 33k. What are there any players... what's the power for like number 4, 5, and 6, true power-wise? And then are those people against the top 3? Or not? Just because that would probably also depend on what I would advise. Okay, yeah, that works too. Let me see. So you posted a pic. Let's see the screenshot. I have to train some troops on this account. Okay, let's see. Alright, so troop power boards. Let's see here. 5, 6, 7. Okay, so you're what? 88, 86, 79. 11 days in. That's pretty good. Link. Ooh, I know Link. Wow, some of these people I actually know. Ooh, I might know Stormy. If it's a player that I'm thinking about. Let's see. Okay. So, 4 of the top... Not even that, sorry. 5 of the top 9 are in the same alliance. 4 out of the top 5 are in the same alliance. And the top 3 in the server in the same alliance. So, I imagine they're probably in the number 1 alliance. And I mean, if you're saying... Thirsty for Honor. Yeah. That's pretty good. So, yeah, I think the alliance name is probably indicative of their situation as well. So, I mean, what I would say is... Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it just depends. I mean, you know, there's 2 ways that it can play out anytime you have opposing groups that are going. Usually, it's always comes down to a battle of attrition, right? So it's, you know, mental and psychological will, and then in-game perseverance and efforts. and most likely it'll probably come down to one group folding before the other one does, no matter how long that takes. And then at that point, you'll probably, at that point, once a winner, if that is what it'll be, is declared, then they'll probably, depending, and then it just depends on what they're doing, right? I mean, sometimes when you have like alliance wars in a server, it can be fun if it's just those alliances, right, going at it. But the moment that they start impacting other players and other alliances that are not in their own, that's when the situation starts getting tricky. Because really all you're doing is just killing off the server at that point, slowly but surely. So, I think in that regard, yeah, I mean, I would either say, reach out to the other alliances that are in your server and maybe see what their viewpoints are as far as banding together. And or what you could do is reach out to the other top players, and see if they're interested in banding together. Because I mean, even Dark Knight, who's 64, almost 65k, right? I mean, again, the challenge is that if you guys don't have anyone that's close in power to the top three, then it might be a little more difficult to actually get successful victories on them. You'd have to catch them when they don't have garrisons. Or you'd have to organize a group of, the next highest level players, like a group of 3 to 5, the next highest level players, and then you guys just do coordinated raids on the top 3 players, and you just hit them back to back. Because the thing to keep in mind, though, is that you do have to be somewhat close in power, right? So, especially if you're not getting victories off your attack on them. And that's because the lower you are in power, the less dead that you'll incur on the enemy, and the more dead you'll take. So if you're close in power and you guys are kind of trading, then you can have a group of other players that are close in power. And eventually you'll whittle down their training grounds, troop capacity, enough to where you'll then start getting more successful victories off, right? So you're kind of overpowering them with numbers, but it really only works when you're pretty close in power. You can't be too far away for the amount of dead and then hard wounded or heavy wounded that gets sent to the hospital takes. So I think right now, with Dark Knight being the only one, he's probably not close enough to the other 3. So, and again, if they're just going around and attacking everyone, then I would say, it's probably time to either get out of Dodge, or if you want to exhaust any of those recommendations that I just provided. But if any of those don't work, then yeah, it might be time just to, keep your head down, grind out passports, or restart your account. So, again, that would be my recommendation based off what you've told me. So, and then, looking at those. Oh, sorry, I thought someone was still typing. Let me see what my time's at now. I'm at 2:03. All right, I will. I'll wait for Awawa to keep typing in case he might have one more question, and then I will go ahead and end it so I can try and get this uploaded sooner rather than later. Must be typing a lot. Oh my gosh, can I go and attack some more gnomes? Oh, so let me see. Awawa just responded. That's my boy, Steve. What up, Steve? Oh, let's see. I see, God, thanks for sharing your point of view. I might try to save the server with diplomatic means first if that's not working out balance. Yeah, I mean, I think doing any of those things are great, right, to try out, but it takes work, man. You know, I mean, like I tell anyone, you know, it's not necessarily easy feat. You know, you'll have to go around and message all the alliances, right? See what their standpoint and their viewpoint is on it, right? Do they want to band together to try and apply pressure to the top alliance in a couple different ways? Because otherwise, you know, it'll probably happen typically like it does in most servers where the top alliance will just, you know, take whatever they want when they want. And especially if they're really aggressive and they keep attacking. It also depends on how knowledgeable they are in PvP mechanics and, you know, and then of course how coordinated your group would be. But yeah, man, it's, you know, I don't say anything to like deter, you know, to deter people away or to get anyone's, you know, hopes up. It's just, you know, I think these are good pieces of information that players should have because, again, if you don't know, then, you know, it's like out of sight, out of mind. And so I think it's always good. Did someone say PvP mechanics? Yeah. So, you know, just always a good idea. So, let me see. Quarry. Another one. Nice. Yeah, man, I really want to go and attack this thing. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Oopsies. Oh, let's see. Nice. Oh my god, I have that one. Wish I could look to you everything works out. Yeah, man, I always do. Well, okay. All right, fam. I am going to go ahead and just start wrapping up with my little outro, if you will. As usual, you know, again, I think there's a lot of great content creators out there that put out a lot of good and hard work for IK. So, you know, always make sure to check out the IK Video Creators channel to get them, you know, give them some love. For anyone that's looking for native speakers, or, you know, there's quite a few content creators that do produce content in other languages, so it's always a good opportunity and area to check out. And then, of course, in addition, right, I appreciate, as always, anyone and everyone who tunes in, you know, for the people that ask questions and engage. It is always a pleasure and a joy to, you know, support any and all of you, you know, in any level of capacity I'm able to, even if it's sometimes just providing some good knowledge and some good experience instances and examples to hopefully allow players to have not only a better gaming experience, but hopefully a better server experience. And I think with that being said, keep in mind week 4 will be next week. Hopefully it's going to be at the regular time in the morning that we usually do it at, which is 12:30 UTC, or sorry, 13:30 UTC, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And then that'll be week 4 endgame. We'll talk about more specific things on migration. We'll talk about some things on recruitment. We'll talk about events, maybe some rumors and things like that that have been swelled up for kind of what you'll do once you get past or at and past 90 days. We'll talk about some other good practices and things to keep in mind if your server has lasted that long with still a majority of your activity, and then a couple other topics too. So anyways, that is it from me. And until next week, I hope everyone has a good day, afternoon, or evening, depending where you're from. And as usual, thanks for tuning in.